Getting off the Monodium hype train for just a minute, we've got Dogmatika. Not just any Dogmatika list, but Invoked Dogmatika. Now, this is the list given to me by my good friend Grim in our Discord server. If you want to get involved in that sort of thing, you can of course join using the link below. But he fired me this list, the two of us set up, and we got some replays just while we were on a Discord voice call, and it was a fucking blast. What is the idea of the new support? Well, I'm going to show you some of the combos and talk you through them during the live gameplay. Again, it's not a deck that I'm ridiculously super well versed with, but it was a fucking shitload of fun, and it's really not that complicated once you get an idea and a grasp of some of the basic plays. It's easy to make mistakes, but it's also, like, once you, like, spot the mistake, you're like, oh, okay, and then you never make that mistake again, and the deck itself is really not that complicated. So what does the deck actually do? Well, what you're trying to do is, number one, first and foremost, through your Invoked engine, you're going to be using the Invoked engine to put some extra deck monsters in your graveyard, so Ecclesia and Maximus and these types of cards can special summon themselves for free, and then you're going to use that engine to go into a Macabre, which is basically Omni Negate, usually Monster Negate, but there you go. So you've got one Negate, and you're giving yourself engine cards for your Dogmatikas to special summon themselves, which is fucking awesome. Then you've got your Dogmatika Ecclesia, which is going to search you Maximus. Maximus is going to pitch some of these really powerful extra deck cards to the graveyard, like your Albion, your Dogmatika, your Titaniclad, your Entis. If you really need to send an Entis, you can send Garura if you really want to draw an extra card. So Maximus is pretty fucking nuts. Because it enables so much. I couldn't talk about the whole thing right here at the beginning, but I will talk you through it at the end of the video, card for card, so stick around for that. But first of all, do watch the gameplay, because you are going to need a little bit to get to grips with some of the plays. I know I did. Maybe y'all are smarter than me, but every little bit of education helps an awful lot. So stick around and watch the gameplay, of course, to get an idea of how they work. But deck profile will be at the end, so if you're interested in this style of content or anything else that we're doing, then you can, of course, feel free to subscribe. We will be starting to shift our streaming. We'll still be streaming on YouTube, of course, but we're also now going to be streaming on other platforms as well. If you want to use Twitch, potentially even other platforms as well. Primarily, we're going to keep it to YouTube and Twitch for now to see how well that works out. So we're going to be expanding our little network even further. So if you're a Twitch viewer or you know anybody who watches on Twitch, there you go. That's another place where you can show support if you are so inclined. But that's pretty much it for now. Let's do some replays and then deck profile at the end. Let's get into it. Alright, so getting into game one, unfortunately going second here, which isn't really ideal for Dogmatika, but luckily for us, our opponent didn't really have much in the way of interaction. So this one's going to mainly be about just showing you some of the plays. We're going to start with our Magical Meltdown. Unfortunately, our opponent does stop the Magical Meltdown, so no Invoker for us on this occasion. A little bit unfortunate because it would have secured us a very easy lethal, but it is what it is. We're going to go into Dear Servant, sending an Entis first and foremost. Entis then going to wipe out that back row, so it's one less thing for us to worry about. That being an Imperm, which is now gone. Ecclesia summoning itself out for free to the field. We're going to go for now our Matrix to grab Albazoa from the deck. We're going to use Dogmatika Calamity to send Lulu Walla from the extra deck to the graveyard to ritual summon. Using Matrix, we're going to send Branded Albion as well. Maximus then banishing the Entis that we pitched earlier in the turn to summon itself. Albazoa going to mill 6 cards. A fuckload of cards from our opponent's extra deck. 7 cards in total. Half their extra deck is gone. And now Maximus is going to take another 2 cards from it, sending Garura and Titaniclad from ours to the grave. We're going to swing in. We get 7,000 damage on board. Invoker would have been lethal. It is what it is. And we're going to end turn. Now, the funny thing about this deck is that one of the problems that we're having is we're summoning too many monsters. We're too good at the game. We're going to go Branded Opening, pot dropping a card to go into Guiding Quem. Quem then going to pitch Albaz to the graveyard, and we're going to grab back Cartesia to our hand as well. Then we're going to use Lulu to summon out the Iris Sword Soul. This could be Cartesia. Maybe it should have been Cartesia on this occasion, but we went for the Iris Sword Soul nonetheless. Titaniclad going to grab us Nexus because we already have Fleur de Lis, and we're set up so ridiculously hard for next turn. And on our board, we have a field full of monsters who are unaffected by extra deck effects. We have our Iris Sword Soul, which is going to grant us additional interruption, and we of course have our massive behemoth, the Albazoa. So they're going to go for Kashtira Ogre here. Kashtira, one of the few decks that can actually play through Dogmatika since they use their main deck more than their extra deck. They're going to go Kashtira Birth here, bringing back the Ogre that they just banished for their Pot of Greed. Going to now normal summon out their Ascendant of Thunder, going Big Eye. I don't know what they thought they were going to do, because Iris Sword Soul, when they summon from the extra deck, can pop a card immediately. They're going to go for Tactics to take control of our Albazoa. Alright, you fucking dork. I don't care about that. They actually activate its effect. And we get to mill like 5 cards from our extra deck to the graveyard, which is insane. We wipe out the Birth. He does take out our Maximus. Alright. Okay. And then he surrenders. He just swung to make himself feel better. But man, the amount of plays that we had in that situation was actually unreal. We could have quick play brought back our Fallen of Albaz from the graveyard to instantly fucking contact fuse with our opponent's shit into like a Mirror Jet or whatever. We had the Fleur de Lis, which was a free negate. We had the Ecclesia and the Nexus for free OTKs next turn. We had the Cartesia to fusion summon next turn. Matt, we were so ridiculously set that it honestly isn't even funny. It is crazy how hard this deck goes sometimes. It really is. But anyways, let's get into game number 2. Alright, so this game does show off some of the plays, but it also has a pretty funny conclusion, which is why I'm including it. We are going to get to resolve our card this time. We're going to go for Alistair the Invoker, grabbing Invocation from the deck. Now, why does Alistair work so well with this deck? Because we can link off in the Almirage, and Almirage can link off into Secure Guard. Now, why is that important? Well, having a Link monster on field means you can special summon the likes of Dogmatika Ecclesia from your hand. Having one in graveyard means you can use the likes of Dogmatika Maximus to special summon itself out to the field. So we're going to get rid of these two to go into an Invoked Macabre. That's great. It's also a light monster for Macabre material, which is also sick. Grabbing back our Alistair here to the hand using the effective Invocation. Now going for Maximus, banishing the Almirage from the grave. We're going to now use the Maximus. We're going to pitch from extra deck to grave our Herald of the Arclight to grab ourselves an Albazoa, as well as the Albion the Branded Dragon. Going to grab our Dogmatika Calamity, sending Lulu, summoning out our Albazoa. Albazoa then going to get Millen from the extra deck. Looks like he's playing some kind of stun. There it is, Runic Stun. We're going to mill an extra card from ours, sending Titaniclad. We're going to now use the Branded Dragon to grab ourselves Branded Opening. This is the big play. This is the big brain play that Grim came to me with, and I think this play is sick. So during the end phase, you use Albion to grab Branded Opening. Branded Opening drops a card to summon Quem. Quem then on summon will send a Fallen of Albaz, and if you read this card's effect, basically if a card leaves the extra deck, that includes just being summoned. If you summon a card from your extra deck, technically it has left the extra deck. So the moment they touch their extra deck, you then get the ability to special summon from your graveyard the Fallen of Albaz or any monster that mentions it. Now, what's going to happen if they've just special summoned a monster from their extra deck? Well, now they're going to have a monster on board that you can fuse with the Albaz to go into Mirror Jade. It's a free Mirror Jade. So that is worth playing around with. Of course, we actually sent all of our Mirror Jade targets. But that's not the point. The point is that it's pretty fucking strong in what you can do. We're going to grab Fleur de Lis, summoning a Cartesia to the board, unlike last time where we went the Irish Sword Soul. Cartesia is typically a little better. Not always though. We're going to mill a bunch of cards. They're going to reveal the top cards of their deck. They're showing us what they're playing. They're going to grab There Can Only Be One, which is a little bit annoying, I'm not going to lie. We are going to respond to that by quickly using our Cartesia's effective fusion summon into the Dusk Dragon. Dusk Dragon dropping Garura to draw one, basically hoping to grab something. They go for the Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician, which basically prevents us from activating any of our monster effects on board so long as we don't have a set card in our back row here. They're going to go for Inspector Border, Cosmic Cyclone, cleaning out our Matrix. They're going to now set free and swing in, taking out the Guiding Quem, ending their turn. So we're going to go Cartesia then, Cartesia back to hand. Not the worst thing in the world. We can maybe play through this, but we can't attack. All we need to do is draw any spell or trap that we can set in our back row. Unfortunately, we draw into the Irish Sword Soul here. We are forced to drop our Dusk Dragon. Normal summoning Alibur, again, we can't do anything, so it's not really worth it. We're forced to just pass. Passing back to your opponent here, they're going to main phase 1, activate Runic Flashing Fire, actually trying to clear out the Macabre, but we have the Branded Opening and Grave to protect it, so they're just going to end their turn again. From their perspective, they're more than happy to just weather this storm, but we top deck into the only spell card in our hand, in our entire deck, that does not go into spell and trap card zone. So here's the thing. Setting this card in my field does not satisfy the condition of the Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician because it specifically says that it's based on the number of set cards in their spell and trap zones. That is not a spell and trap zone, that is a field spell zone. However, if you make a bad play with enough confidence, they'll believe you. We said it, and they scoop. So, we got to show off a couple of plays, really fun game, and then we psyched our opponent out at the very end, and he took the bait and surrendered. So, you know what? All's well that ends well. Into the next game. Alright, into game number 3 here. Going main phase 1, we are starting going first here, which is really good. We're going to go Magical Meltdown, grabbing our Alistair. Alistair then going to search our deck for Invocation. We're now going to get hit with a Maxi. Now, every great deck struggles with Maxi. What we decide to do here, whether right or wrong, we decide we're just going to go Albazoa because it sets up something decent where we can mill a bunch of his extra deck. Turns out he's playing Gate Guardians. And we also get to use the Lulu Wall if we do summon the Iris Sword Soul. We let him draw twice. We had to do something, otherwise we die, but the 2 draws, hopefully we might be able to play through. They're going to go Shadow Ghoul here. We're going to go for a Maxi of our own here, which they unironically do not have the out to, so that's really good. So that means that, you know what, they may not go crazy this turn. We might get ourselves another chance to play the game. They're going to go Labyrinth, Wall, Shadow. They're going to go for Labyrinth, Heavy Attack. Now going to set the Sanga of the Thunder directly to the field. They're now going to set the Suijin to the field as well, and they're going to set 2 and pass back to me then. So they're going to flip up now Prey of the Gumo, or whatever the hell that is. Pumping our Albazoa. Unfortunately, it is not immune to trap effects, only extra deck monsters. Going into Almirage here. Almirage then going into our Secure Gardna. We're going to use the Gating Quem to bring back the Cartesia. We're going to go for Invocation. We're going to banish the Albazoa and the Almirage from the graveyard to go into Purgatrio. This is game over because the Purgatrio then 3500 attack and attack all of his monsters, and he inflicts piercing damage. That's 45. We're going to boost him up to 45 as well off of Alistair the Invoker. 45 over the 100 over the 24 gives us more than enough of an ability to go for lethal damage here, but unfortunately he had the Nibiru. We're going to very quickly chain to the Nibiru. We're going to fusion summon off into our Dusk Dragon using our 2 Dogmatika cards. It is going to get tributed, but that does mean that it's going to be in the graveyard and witness the summoning of the Nibiru, which at least gives us a little bit of something. We get the grab back Invocation here. Sorry, the Invoker back to our hand, Invocation back to deck. Dust Dragon then banishing itself from the graveyard. We're going to summon out the Ecclesia from deck. Ecclesia then searching for Maximus, hoping to rebuild something of a board after that brutal Nibiru. Going to go for Maximus now. Maximus mill 2. We're going to send a Garura and an Intis, hoping to take away some of this advantage. Pumping that face down card. I don't really want to deal with whatever the hell that is. I don't even know what that card is. We're going to grab another Magical Meltdown off of our Garura draw. We're just going to activate it because why not? Swinging in, taking out the Nibiru. Actually, no, we're not. I forgot. We go into battle phase, and this field spell immediately screws us over because this field spell basically says that if your level is below 5, you cannot attack on the turn in which you special summoned. But it also, at the beginning of the battle phase, gets to target a monster in the field with less than 1600 attack and immediately destroy it. Unfortunately, our Maximus, being the only monster that can attack, was too low in attack points to survive the Labyrinth Wall Shadow, so it does, unfortunately, eat shit and go to the grave. Grabbing our Cartesia back during the end phase, but it's simply not going to be enough. They're going to grab another one of their demons here from their deck. They're going to go Gate Guardian of Wind and Water, normal summoning out their Labyrinth tank yet again, popping the token, going to go for the Trap Cards effect, and to banish it to grab back the Kazagen from the Banish Pile, and that is enough for me. Those cards are nuts. I honestly, Gate Guardians are fucking... That is a big sleeper. That deck is fucking sick. I can't wait to play it. That's probably going to be one of the next videos I do. Gate Guardians are fucking amazing. Really, really good. I think they're going to be massively slept on too. But yes, unfortunately, he had the outs. Maxi's still a problem. He was not playing an extra deck focused strategy, at least not entirely, which led to our Albazoa not being as powerful as we otherwise would have liked it to be. Nibiru then stealing the game back from us. We would have won that game if it wasn't for that Nibiru. But what are you going to do? Cry about it? Let's get in and have a look at the actual deck itself. And here's the list. We actually got to show off pretty much all of the major combos in the actual deck gameplay itself. Now, what is one small change I would make to this deck? The one thing that I would change is, in hindsight, I would like to play additional Mirror Jade targets. I would likely drop an Entis. I thought 2 copies was going to come up more often than it did. It really didn't. So I would maybe drop an Entis and consider something like a second Titaniclad. You're going to witness it here first. Basic, whatever. Little bitch. But I would definitely recommend playing a second Titaniclad. I was trying to get away with not playing it. And in certain situations, it just definitely comes up. Primarily as a Mirror Jade target, but otherwise, it is just a really powerful card. It's hard to not want to play more of it. So if you're watching, don't make the same mistake I did. You can get away with one Titaniclad. If you're not going to play another Titaniclad, play another target. Play something else. Play fucking, I don't know, Brigrand. Play another Albion. Play something. But just make sure you're putting in another Mirror Jade fusion there. So play Rindbrum. Rindbrum's pretty good as well, right? Play that instead. I don't fucking know. Even play the Sanctifier Dragon if you want to be an asshole. There's plenty of options for you, but my advice, if you have the card already or if you have the credits available, then a second Titaniclad would definitely not go amiss. So here's the deck. Let's talk through it one card at a time so we all get a clear idea of what we're talking about. I will remove the auxiliary cards first of all. Of course, we got the triple Maxi, triple Ash Blossom, double Call By, single Crossout, and our one of Imperm, just as a crossout target mainly. So that's all the auxiliary cards. We got 10 slots. You could potentially work even more into this. There are certain cards that you can increase or decrease ratios of. Albion the Shredded Dragon never really came up. Nexus, I'm not a huge fan of Nexus, but I can see why it would be good. There are definitely some cards you can play around with. If you want to maybe even play another copy of Quem, it would almost be a good idea. There's a ton of things you can do. With this deck. Ultimately, it is quite modular. Let's go through and we'll actually talk about the deck, starting with the Invoked cards. And the Invoked cards all center around the A-list celebrity himself, Alistair the Invoker. On normal summon, you basically get to search your deck for the fusion spell Invocation. It's that simple. He also has another effect that allows you to boost up a fusion monster by discarding him by 1000 attack and defense, which is kind of neat. Really good for Purgatory OTKs, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, solid card overall because it searches for a fusion spell. Fusion summon using monsters from your hand as material, or if you're summoning an invoked monster, you can use monsters from either player's graveyard. Normally, you're just going to combine like your Secure Gardener and your Alistair to go into Makaba, which is your main fusion monster, being a negate. But that's, again, pretty solid. It's just a fusion spell that you can search for off of your A-list celebrity's normal summon. And we're also then running 3 copies of Magical Meltdown, which on activation will add Alistair from deck to hand. So it's basically 3 extra copies of this dork. And it also will prevent the negation of your cards and effects that include an effective fusion summon cannot be negated. Also, your opponent's cards and effects cannot activate when a fusion monster is fusion summoned. This is basically just branded Lost, except Alistair, right? It's branded Lost, except I would say better. Because it's a field spell and it searches for the actual core monster itself. Now, why is this the engine that we choose to run in this deck? And why am I choking on oxygen? Well, I can answer one of those questions. I can't answer the second one, but I can answer the first one. And the first one is because in normal summoning Alistair and setting up the whole combo, what you're going to be doing is you're going to use Alistair as link material for Salamangreat Almirage. Then you're going to link off Salamangreat Almirage into your Secure Gardener. These 2 cards don't matter other than the fact that they work in this way and that they're extra deck monsters. With an extra deck monster on your field, your Dogmatika Ecclesia, your Fleur-de-Lis, all of these cards can special summon themselves from the hand for free. Having an Almirage in graveyard means that your Maximus can special summon itself for free by banishing the Almirage from grave. So basically, not only are you using the Alistair to set up an actual negate in the form of Makaba and go through all these plays, you're mainly using it to set up these extra deck monsters on your field and graveyard to free up your Dogmatika cards so you can actually combo off. You're not getting stifled by getting a normal summon negated. So that's the main reason. Getting into the actual Dogmatika cards themselves, we have Ecclesia. Ecclesia can be special summoned if there's an extra deck monster on the field. On summon, you search your deck for a Dogmatika card. It's that simple, really straightforward card. We have Cartesia. Cartesia then can special summon itself to the field from your hand if you have a Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard or on your field, which doesn't happen very often, but it can do. So Cartesia can technically special summon itself, but its main effect is that as a quick effect, you can fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster using monsters in your hand and field as material. So you'll usually try to special summon this card to the field through one means or another, and then you will use it to fusion summon either on your turn or on your opponent's turn to go into the likes of the Dusk Dragon. So it's a pretty useful fusion card. We have the new monster, the Guiding Quem the Virtuous. Guiding Quem the Virtuous is treated as both a Dogmatika and Despia card at all times. So it is essentially Dogmatika, Despia, Guiding Quem the Virtuous, but you can see why they didn't print that on a fucking card. On summon, you're going to send a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it from deck to grave. We are actually sending the Fallen of Albaz. And why are we doing that? Well, if a monster is removed from the extra deck, either player's extra deck, you can target a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it in grave and special summon it. Now that could relate to your Ecclesia, or it could relate to the Fallen of Albaz, maybe even Albion. but primarily the Fallen of Albaz. And why is that? Well, the Fallen of Albaz, when summoned, will discard a card to fusion summon using itself, as well as a monster on the opponent's side of the field, which means that Guiding Quem, because they react to an extra deck summon or a card leaving the extra deck, your opponent is almost certainly going to have an extra deck monster on board, so your Albaz will be able to fuse with whatever it is to summon out Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon, which we will get to in a minute, although everyone fucking knows Mirror Jade at this point. So Guiding Quem, that's what it does. You will summon this card out to the field during the end phase of your turn, thanks to things like your Titaniclad or your branded opening, or whatever it is you decide to do to get this card on board. There's a ton of ways of doing it. Fleur-de-Lis can special summon itself to the field if there's an extra deck monster on board, and if you already control another Dogmatika card, you can then negate the effects of a face-up monster in the field until the end of the turn. So it's quick play, non-targeting negation, which is pretty fucking sick. You will typically add this card to your hand during your end phase off a Titaniclad, so you don't really need to like draw into it, you don't even need to really search for it during your turn itself. It just kind of gets added to your hand at the end of the turn, so it's pretty sick. Maximus then, one of your key engine cards. This card can banish an extra deck monster from the graveyard to special summon itself out to the field. During the main phase, you can use its effect to send 2 monsters with different names from your extra deck to the graveyard, and your opponent is forced to do the same thing. Now, that doesn't sound like much other than a hiccup, but what it actually does is it allows you to set up quite a lot of really powerful cards in your graveyard. You can send Albion, you can send Titaniclad, Herald of the Arclight, Garura, Entis, even a new one, the Golden Cloud Beast, all of which we're going to talk about towards the end. You typically won't send Lulu because we're going to do that through a different means, but there's a ton of really powerful, useful cards that you can send to the graveyard off of Maximus, and then milling your opponent's extra deck as well gives you an idea of what they're playing, and can even remove some of their key resources in combination with the Albazoa, depending again on the deck. We have 2 copies of the... fuck it, we'll talk about Despy as well. 2 copies of Albion. This card can basically, while it's in hand, reveal itself, send a branded spell or trap for deck to graveyard, shuffle itself back, draw 1. Little mulligan does not hurt. I probably wouldn't play it 2 in hindsight. I think maybe 1 is fine. I do value the card a little bit because it can help set up something like a branded and high spirits going forward. But it's not the greatest card in the world. So if you didn't want to play it at all, I would understand that. I think playing it at 1 is fine, because the mulligan can definitely come in handy. But it's not mandatory by any stretch of the imagination. We did skip over Aliber because we weren't initially talking about Despia, but we will now, and this card is very, very straightforward. On summon, search your deck for a branded spell or trap card. Moving on. We've got the Irish Sword Soul. The Irish Sword Soul will almost exclusively be special summoned to your field during the end phase by the likes of a Dogmatika, a Titaniclad, or, I mean, potentially something else, but most of the time by something like that. The Irish Sword Soul, sorry, not by Titaniclad, by Lulurif, Lulu Wallach. I'm not getting this right at all. I'm not cutting that out. That's fine. Lulu Wallach, y'all can see me having a stroke on camera. So this card will allow you to special summon out a spellcaster from your deck during the end phase, as long as its attack and defense are equal. This is a light spellcaster with 2500 attack and defense. You don't have to play this card. You could totally drop it if you wanted to, but it's just a really good search off of Lulu Wallach. Like, why would you not want to search it off Lulu, right? Quem is a really good one, Cartesia is a really good one, and Ecclesia is an okay one. You've probably already used it by then. They're pretty good as well, so if you wanted to use those instead, you could just drop the Irish Sword Soul and not play it. But I fancied having the additional option, and it worked out for us more than once. So, yeah, I fuck with it. We got Nexus, which I think is the iffiest of the cards. I'm not the biggest fan of this one. Basically, you need to target 4 Fusion, Synchro Exceed, or Link monsters in either graveyard, special summon this, and then banish all of them. During the damage step, if it battles a special summon monster, you destroy all attack position monsters, and then inflict 800 damage to your opponent for every extra deck monster among them. So it's useful for OTKs. It's a big sort of OTK tool. You can wipe out your opponent's whole board and stuff. So it's definitely not weak, and it is a cool card. I don't know. I've yet to see it be too helpful in situations, but to be fair, we've been fairly dominant with the deck so far, so it could just be a case of, you know, we aren't finding ourselves in positions where we need it to come back, right? So that's another possibility. So Nexus is generally a really solid card. I will continue to play it and experiment with it, but yeah, just know that it's another one that's kind of on the fence. We have the big man himself, the Dogmatika Albazoa, the Ritual Monster, level 12. This guy's utility is more in how you summon him rather than in his actual effect. What is his actual effect? Well, first and foremost, all of your Dogmatika cards are unaffected by the activated effects of opponents' Fusion, Synchro Exceed, and Link monsters. Basically, your Dogmatika cards are immune to extra deck monsters, which is pretty fucking sick. Secondary to that, you can also force your opponent to make a choice. They can either, for every 2 cards in their extra deck, send a card from their hand or extra deck to the graveyard, or they can return all extra deck monsters they control back to the extra deck. So if you're going second, you're forcing them into a position where they either drop half their extra deck or bounce their whole field back, or if you're going first, you're just taking half their extra deck away off the rip. You're just taking 7 cards out of their extra deck because it's rounded down. So you take 7 out of their extra deck right away, and then your Maximus will take another 2. There's 9. You want to get really mean, you can take out another one with Dogmatika Matrix. There's 10. You could leave your opponent with a 5 card extra deck going into their first turn. That is something that you could do. Yeah, usually you're going to use Matrix on your turn, so you're going to let them have 6 cards. But, you know, it is what it is. So Dogmatika Albazoa can be absolutely disgusting. Some decks, however, are not reliant on their extra deck, and some decks even like having extra deck monsters in graveyard. So is that always going to be a good idea, and is it always going to win you games? Not always, but most of the time it will. Then getting into our spells and traps, we have Nadir's Servant, which is one of the best cards in Master Duel in general. Honestly, in my opinion, for how it works and interacts with its archetype, I think this is like one of the best searching spells in like the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? I mean, it used to be limited to 1 back when this game first came out, and for good reason. Shit was dominant. But either way, basically what you do is you send a monster from your extra deck to the graveyard and add a Dogmatika monster or a Fallen of Albaz from the deck or graveyard to your hand, as long as its attack is less than the monster sent. So not only do you get to search your deck for basically whatever you want, you also then get to send an extra deck monster from the deck to the graveyard, meaning you get to send a Garura to draw, send an Intis to pop, send Titaniclad or Albion or Garganol or Herald or the Golden Beast to get searching or popping or swinging or bouncing or doing whatever the hell you want. You get an extra deck function plus a search, which is just incredible. Dogmatika Calamity is your ritual spell. You're going to use this to ritual summon your Albazoa by sending a card from your extra deck to the graveyard as material. We're going to send our Lulu Wallaf. Lulu has been the missing ingredient for this deck, and now that we have an actual good target off of Dogmatika Calamity, we can make even better use of the Albazoa because this card is really fucking useful. So now Albazoa, half of its value is just in the fact that you're using Dogmatika Calamity to summon it. Dogmatika Matrix is basically a really, really solid card. It's got 2 effects, kind of. Number 1, on activation, you get to grab a Dogmatika ritual monster or spell from your deck to your hand. But if your opponent also happens to control a monster already, you can add any other Dogmatika card from your deck to your hand in addition to your first search. So this card can actually add 2 cards from your deck to your hand. If you control a Dogmatika ritual monster, you can also activate this to send an additional card from either your extra deck to the graveyard or your opponent's extra deck to the graveyard. Almost always gonna do yours unless you have a pretty fucking nasty turn and you're able to do all sorts of shit, in which case you might choose your opponent's, but in the vast majority of circumstances you're gonna choose your own. Branded Opening will special summon out the Alibur, Jester, Despia from deck to get searching your deck for another branded spell or trap. Pretty straightforward. Or sorry, well, what its main use in this deck is, apologies, is you're gonna grab this during the end phase of your turn using your Albion. Then in that same end phase, you're going to use its effect to special summon Guiding Quem out to the field. Guiding Quem then is going to send Albaz to the graveyard and set up your whole McFucking play. Right? That is how the play works. And Guiding Quem brings us back during your opponent's turn. Fusion shenanigans ensue and rage quits happen. So Branded Opening is actually a key part of the deck, not for Alibur, so correct me there, I was slightly mistaken, but rather for Guiding Quem. I'm so used to just using this for Alibur and the Branded Fusion that anytime I see this card, I automatically think, okay, Alibur Branded Fusion. But no, in this deck, it plays very, very differently, and you saw it in the opening games as well. And lastly, we have Branded in High Spirits. Reveal a monster in your hand, send a level 8 fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard with the same type as that monster, and then you can apply the effect. You can discard the revealed monster to grab a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it. Basically, it can search your deck for the likes of Guiding Quem or Cartesia or even Albaz, by sending the Garganol or another monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, depending on what you have in your hand to reveal. So Branded and High Spirits is definitely a solid card. It's a nice Aliber target, but Aliber, again, it sort of works in reverse in this deck. Most decks play opening to search for Aliber to do whatever. In this deck, we're kind of using Aliber to search for these cards. So it's kind of backwards, but it works. Getting into the extra deck itself. So what monsters are we actually aiming to summon versus what are we aiming to send to grave? The vast majority of the extra deck is just here to be sent directly to the graveyard from your various card effects. What ones are you actually going to summon though? You're going to summon Invoked Purgatrio. Why are you going to summon this? Because it's pretty fucking insane in terms of OTK potential. It gains 200 attack for each card your opponent controls, and that's card as in back row and all. So it gets pretty big pretty quick. It can attack all monsters your opponent controls, and if it does piercing damage. So this thing is pretty nuts when it comes to OTKs. Very underrated card. Very, very cool. This card was actually broken in Duel Links for a long time. Purgatrio is the fucking shit. And then we're also going to be playing Invoked Mekaba. Mekaba is the Light Alistair fusion, where basically if your opponent activates a card effect, you can discard that same type of card from your hand to negate that effect and banish the card. So to activate a monster, discard a monster, negate and banish. So it's just a negate, which is sick. In terms of anything else, most of the rest of these are just going to be sent from the extra deck to the grave. We've already talked about the Link monsters, so what do the rest of them do? When Entis is sent to grave, you pop a card. Garura, you draw a card. Albion, at the end of the turn, you're going to grab a branded spell or trap and then either set it to your field or add it to hand. You're going to grab the branded opening and do the whole Quem play. We have Garganol, which you will typically actually summon, but it's also kind of decent otherwise. We'll talk about this in a second. Herald of the Arclight, when sent to grave, will search your deck for one of your ritual pieces. Occasionally, you do need the extra gas to go into it. I initially was skeptical, but I was proven wrong very quickly. You absolutely must run one of these. And Golden Beast is a bit of an oddball. Basically, it's a lot like Entis, in that it basically, when sent to the grave, will target a face-up card your opponent controls, and instead of destroying it, it returns it to hand. Now, having the option to choose between Entis and the Golden Cloud Beast is pretty important, because this guy deals better with things like Mirror Jade. That's the main example of something, because Mirror Jade's going to be everywhere right now with how much Branded just got buffed. So you do need to be ready for Mirror Jade, and the Cloud Beast is definitely a way of doing it. Lulu Wallop as well, sent to the graveyard off of your Albazoa summon. During the end phase of that turn, you will special summon a light spellcaster whose attack and defense are the same. That's your Quem, your Cartesia, or your Iris Sword Soul. Most of the rest of these are not equal. I mean, I guess technically Fleur de Lis is, but that's not how you want to use that card. It's basically Iris Sword Soul, Quem, or Cartesia. And that pretty much covers most of the extra deck. This card, you will also sometimes summon it off of the effect of your Garganol. This card's pretty cool, where you will basically, on summon, you will send a level 6 or higher light or dark monster from deck or extra deck to the graveyard. Again, just further stacking your graveyard, further stacking all of these really powerful effects. It can also, if your opponent special summons a monster through an activated monster effect, you can banish this card from field or grave to special summon a Dogmatika monster from your deck or a Despian monster from your extra deck. So you can summon the Lulu Wallop directly from your extra deck, or you can potentially go into a Dogmatika monster from your main deck. So the Gorgonol, or whatever the hell his name is, I just call him the Dust Dragon, is pretty damn sick. Now, what does the Lulu do on the actual field itself? Well, if a card were to leave the extra deck, all monsters you currently control gain 500 attack permanently, and then you can negate the effects of a face-up card on the field until the end of that turn. So if your opponent basically summons anything from the extra deck, or if you yourself mill a card from your extra deck, then it will negate a card, which is pretty straightforward. And that pretty much covers everything other than Mirror Jade, but everyone knows what Mirror Jade does. Once per every other turn, a non-targeting banish is pretty self-explanatory. It's primarily here to be used alongside the Albaz, where you fuse an opponent's extra deck monster off of your Quem combo into the Mirror Jade, and then you can send one of these dorks to grave to get banishing. But yeah, that's the whole deck. Again, the deck is an absolute blast. Let me bring up the full list again here, just so we can get a good look at it. Again, the only change we made was the second Titaniclad. This is the deck. Again, big shout out to Grim, who actually gave me the idea, built the deck with me, showed me some of the plays. Massive shout out to Grim. And anybody else in the Discord as well. If you're not in the Discord and you want to be involved in the community, that is where most of the community activities happen and where most of it will be running. So Absolutely, it's free. Why wouldn't you join, right? And speaking of free, why wouldn't you subscribe if you watched this far into the video? Obviously, you've enjoyed something, so I'd recommend leaving a like as well. Check out one of the other videos you're seeing on your screen. That one above there, that's awful juicy looking. You can probably click on that one. But other than that, I'll leave you to it. Bye-bye.